Hello and welcome to the Winners Find a Way Show. I am your host, Trent Clark, CEO of Leadershipity, serial entrepreneur organization member, international speaker, speaking in over 17 countries. And I just wrote a book, Leading Winning Teams, which you can check out by Wiley. But of course, most people know me because I coach some of the best in the world, and we have Bloom Growth Coach, and we help all these companies double. But they know me because I spent over 13 years coaching in pro baseball and 3 World Series. And today on Winners Find a Way Show, I welcome a good friend and someone very near and dear to me, Gina Mollicone-Long. Gina, how are you doing?
Great. I want to be in your highlight reel. I just want to say that straight up front.
You know, we're gonna have to adapt that front side right now, Gina. And listen, you're gonna make the cut. Like with
I
that
want to
beautiful
be.
shirt right there. Come on, girl. Like, yeah, like you just bring it all the time. I was blessed to spend some great time one-on-one with Gina a couple weeks ago, and in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Thank you very much.
Good
Welcome,
meal.
welcome, Gina, delivering all the goods to our members here at Entrepreneurs Organization in West Michigan, and it was a fabulous venue, show, everything. Great rating, and everybody loved it and walked away with great nuggets. And I want to talk about that because as a 2-time author and an absolute superstar at helping people break through, you're going to want to tune in to every second minute of this episode. So, Gina, so thankful you could be here. How have you been? Tell me that.
Good. Great. I
Yeah.
mean, the momentum has just been crazy. I leave for Japan tomorrow, speaking in Singapore next week. It's good. Very good. Things are good.
Yeah. And Gina and I have done this international speaking thing. In fact, we met our first time in Greece when Gina, a University of Toledo engineering grad, and the
Toronto.
name,
Toronto.
I'm sorry,
Come on
University of
now.
Toronto. Wow, what did I say?
Toledo.
I said my school,
Yeah.
University of Toronto, engineering grad, and then a master's in studies of science of religion
Yeah. It's a
and
philosophy. It was a philosophy
is a
degree in
philosophy,
science and religion. So it's
science
a
and
very
religion.
unique program.
Yeah, I love that. And you've always been a deep thinker, right? And so this is played in, and it's interesting because, man, I don't always see the engineers who are very calculated typically, right? But diving into this science and religion, like did the rest of your engineering crew go, "Hey, man, what do you think? This is a good idea. Like, where are you going?"
Well, it's funny because that's everyone's sort of top line reaction. But if you
Yeah,
if you step back and look at the big picture, science is a system, religion is a system, and I'm a systems junkie. I seek information via multiple systems. So for me, I'm not attached to one versus the other, science versus religion, or uh, this data versus that data. For me, what I look for when I study a system is the similarities. And what I can tell you is that all the systems, ancient or modern, have similar processes that can be then, you can sort of reinforce one or the other, and that makes you feel good about maybe something you're doing in the modern time was something they were doing in the ancient time. But where the real gold is, when I study an ancient system, and I'm not attached to it being right or wrong, I find a nugget that we aren't maybe executing well in modern vernacular, and then when I can bring that across, map it over into our current language, I can use it to help people really break through those barriers faster and with less effort than most people are doing it.
love it. I love the efficiency, idea of it, right? Like that's our whole world is getting better, getting faster, being more efficient. Let's talk about, now married 29 years. It's awesome.
Almost this
Yeah,
year.
almost 29 years,
Yeah.
2 kids, 23, almost 22.
Yeah.
So you're in that, you're in the freedom like reign
Well,
now,
it's
like you're empty
definitely, yeah.
nester, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, empty is a bit of a misnomer, but mostly empty.
Yeah. Yeah, I
It's
think all of us thought we were gonna be
loosely
empty
full.
nesters at like 18. Like, "Hey, all you guys gotta get out of here." Like,
Well,
they
but for
never
me,
left.
I don't know what it's like for you. When I turned 18, when I turned 18 and I went off to university, I never went home again.
Same. Yeah, like I and by the way, like anybody else, I was a hometown kid who couldn't wait to get out of my hometown. So I was like, I'm never coming back here. This is that I want to be here. I wanted to see the world, and
Yeah.
I went and go and did that. But you're right. I didn't have any intention of ever going home, and I never did.
But I think that, like, that we came from the same genre of timing. And, back in the late 1900s when we grew up, we just left. Like, I didn't know what I was doing any more than anybody now knows what they're doing. The thing is I made it so I didn't have a choice. I just had to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's yeah. There's there was a lot of figuring it out back then. I mean, we were all I felt like we grew up faster. And I
Well,
was
you
the
just
youngest of four. So I felt like I was ready to grow up fast, which is probably a demise. Like I maybe missed some things in my childhood because I was all excited about what my older brothers were doing and all these things. But it was a lot of figure it out. And I think that was part of our kind of engineering mindset was like, hey, listen, we got to recreate this thing. Like, how are we going to do it? Like, let's
Yeah.
put our heads together and see what we can come up with and build some ideas.
Well, it is definitely an asset to think that way. Like everything for me is a process, and therefore, as quickly as I can run through the process and get a measurement, I can know if the process is working, and then I can go back in and I can tinker with the variables. And that's literally when I went from engineering to humans, to the mind. I was a process control engineer, and so all I did was, treat the human being as the machine that we were, suspending those processes, optimizing the variables, running the processes as quickly as we can. So, when I wrote The Secret of Successful Failing, it's obviously not a book about how to fail. It's like the stupidest book ever. But it's a book about this attachment we have to this one chance we have to succeed. And oh my God, help you if you don't succeed. I'm like that's a measurement point. So if you succeed, great. And if you fail, by the way, not an F word, means you didn't get what you wanted your way, then you just simply take the feedback and you run the process again, right?
Yeah.
So the process isn't proof, like the result, if you fail, isn't proof that you can't. It's simply proof that you didn't.
Yeah.
And so that's a different question.
Yeah.
Instead of standing there wallowing in your one-time chance at success, take the data and run it again. And that's what peak performers are doing. Ready, fire, aim. A peak performer has failed more by the time the average person gets up than that person will do in their entire lifetime.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I think I was just probably lucky and blessed growing up in the late 1900s when, baseball was your failures, like your failure rate's 70%, right? Like, and you're a hero, by the way, if you're successful 30% of the time. So
Right.
you get very used to the fact, like, hey, that's
Nope.
just a data point.
That
Like I
wasn't
struck
it.
out. This is
Yeah.
what they did and it worked. Unless the next time I won't, because I know the data points of what they're trying to do against me, right? And so that adjustment period was such a big deal. And I can't even put it in my mind that, if we're sitting on a team and I come back to the bench and go, Gina, I struck out the first time. Just forget it. I'm not going back out there. It's too hard. And just forget my other three chances. I mean, said no one ever in the sport of baseball, right? Like we all can't wait to take the data that we just learned and try to apply it to the next chance that we can get, which has a very also good chance of not working out well. But we're ready to test it and see what goes and adapt very quickly to it. It's absolutely an athletic superpower because you develop those tools and you develop that mentality at a very young age. That feedback, that coachability is such a gift. Because
Right. Just
if I don't
get
get
back
it,
at it.
yeah, if I don't get it, or I get bad feedback, or all these things, like you're looking for the highest quality feedback and information all the time. I love that. So the two-time author, The Secret of Successful Failing, and then of course Think or Swim, which Think or
Not
Swim.
swim.
What's
Think or
that?
sink, man. It's think or sink. There's
Maybe
no
I can't
swimming.
remember my own writing. Like I actually own that book, by the way. Think or Sink. Thank you.
Pretty
Think or Sink.
self-explanatory.
Yeah, so Think or Sink wrote that. Tell us a little bit about two things. Tell them, first of all, where they can find you, and then tell them why you wrote two books and the conceptually about each of the two.
Okay. So, well, you can find, I'm the only Gina Mollicone pretty much there is, but for ease, if someone like the place I always send people is to my link tree, because that I can change, and then I can just give you the same address. So if you just go to linktr.ee/Gina Mollicone, you can find me everywhere, or you can just go to ginamollicone.com. I mean, whatever. But the books, so what you can imagine, as you know, so being an engineer, I had no jurisdiction to write about the mind. So I had all this information and I was doing all these things, but I didn't, I couldn't get it going because I had no jurisdiction. And one of my friends got critically ill, and we were very young. And I said, I know all these things. It was an engineering friend of mine, actually. I said, I know all these things that I want to tell you about, but I don't want you to feel like you have to believe it. I need to share it with you in case it helps you, with what you're going through right now. And I won't forgive myself if I don't share it with you. So I kind of just went bleh, with all the information in the book that would have been in the book. And she called me the next day and said, okay, that was a lot. But one thing that's interesting is I've stopped crying and I've made a plan, and here's what I'm going to do. And And she said, you got to put that, you got to write the book. You have to write it. That was so valuable to me. What you did was such a great service. You have to write the book. And so I did. And so I credit her with getting me to put it on paper and get it out the door. And that was, God, almost 20 years ago, and she's still around. And it was such a turning point because it wasn't about me putting that first book out. So the whole time I was stuck on it, I guess I was stuck in my ego. Will it be good? Will people like it? Will they agree? And when it became about a service to someone else, it immediately, and I wrote it like literally in a week, put it down on paper and out the door. And 6 or 8 months later, we were holding it in real time. And then Think or Sink came pretty quickly on its heels because it was almost a follow-up, but it was a little bit more of a practical, not a playbook. It's not a workbook, but Think or Sink's a lot more like, you're a peak performer. Like, here's what you have to do, or you're going to sink, right? So they go together. One's a little bit more philosophical on what failure is and how to succeed, and the other one's a little bit more practical.
Love it. One of the things that most people don't know about you is, as a master trainer of NLP, a breakthrough coach. I mean, you've done so many things in the front of the mind here, but tactily, you got to go out there. You got to be fit. You go out, get involved in karate, which I love. And you're now an orange belt, bumping up on your green belt, the way to your black belt, which is probably 8 to 10 years away. This is not an overnight thing.
No.
And tell us a little bit about that. Like, hey, this is my thing on the side I've got to do.
So, as you know, you're either growing or you're not growing. So growing or dying, right? And so I always pick things that are way outside my comfort zone, because that's the state of mind of adaptability and resilience and whatnot. I've always done this. So I've always picked things that were outside of the realm of what was easy or even possible, quite frankly. And this time in my life, my kids are gone, and I'm like, well, what can I work on now? It can't be an overnight thing. It's not like, oh, I want to paint a picture, right? It has to have some staying power so that I keep going, right? It has to have that disciplined action. And I was like, oh man, karate's perfect. And so it's got such a huge timeline. It's got at least a 10-year timeline, at least. I mean, I went white, yellow, orange, then it's green, purple, blue, brown for 2 years, then black. So we're talking a decade solid minimum. And not to mention the physical requirements. And I'm, in my mid 50s. So I got a different body composition as the 15-year-old boy with unlimited energy standing beside me. So it's a very humbling experience, because if I sat there and compared myself to the rest of the class, I would have left on the first day. Right. And so I do what I can do, and I am improving. And it really is wax on, wax off. Like I can't even begin to tell you how many cross body movements there are that I'm like, okay, left hand, you're doing this while the right hand's doing that. And that alone is keeping me in a resilient state because my brain is continuously being challenged across the hemispheres, right hand, left hand. It's not to mention the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, the whole idea of it. But the idea of learn to do something right and then practice it 27 million times so that if you need it in a crisis, i.e. a fight, you'll know how to do it. Yeah. It really is Karate Kid. Like it's bang on.
Yeah, I love it. That's, first of all, it gives some authority and authenticity to Karate Kid, by the way, which I like.
Yeah.
As one of the best late 1900 movies that was out there as our kid days, and memorable, right? Like, and I think it's good tips about, I always talk about confidence, right? Confidence is prep and reps because you need to be confident in now a skirmish. And that confidence is because you prepared for what might happen and you've got that mentally. Now, physically, you prepared that. Now you've got these repetitions that you know what to do when that happens. The SEALs always talk about your training goes down to the lowest level. When the crisis hits, you act at the lowest level of your training, not the highest level of your training. Like, oh, this one thing I do super well. Well, it's likely you're not going to need that one thing in the crisis. It's the one thing you don't do well that you need in the crisis.
Oh yeah, no. Like this little diagram behind me on the blackboard is until you get to point D, and it's a habit, the dominant neurological habit. In a crisis, you will revert to the most dominant habit. That's why patterns repeat themselves, right? In a crisis. So, let's take gratitude as an example, because it's like, everybody knows you got to be grateful, right? So you got to be pretty much a moron if you can't conjure up gratitude looking at a sunset or a puppy or something, right? Like that's not difficult, people. So getting up in the morning and going, oh, the best chocolate chip cookie I ever had, I'm so grateful for it. Like, great, good practice. But gratitude is needed in the moment of failure. And very few people in the moment of failure go, thank you for giving me such useful feedback so I can go back and plug it into the system and run it as quickly as possible to get what I want. No, most people sit there when they fail and they're like, oh, I knew I sucked. Why? Right? They don't do gratitude. And gratitude, the power, when all the shit you read about gratitude, all the studies you read about gratitude, the power of gratitude is in being in a gratitude or gracious state when the circumstances are not to your liking. That's the power, the miraculous power, if you will. And so you practice on sunsets and puppies because, but the truth is performance points are on failures and catastrophes. But you go back to your most dominant pattern in those crisis points. And so that's why everybody kind of ends up getting the same thing over and over again, because they're the same person over and over again, because nothing's really changed. And that's what a breakthrough is it's one thing to do the behavior, but it's another thing to make that pattern dominant. And that's where the discipline of doing things over and over and over and over and over and over and over until you can't not do it that way.
Yeah.
Right? Under pressure in the most intense circumstances.
And by the way, we all do this. We all do this in our lives. We drive. And we've done this. We've done this again and again and again. And we know the rules. We know the laws. We know where we're supposed to be. We know how to start the car, what blinkers do, how we turn on the window wipers. I mean, we've done reps and reps and reps and reps of this. So we do have this practice in our life. I've never equated gratitude, right, with failure. But I do go back to, like, biblically, right? James 1:2. And this is a challenge for me, right? Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything.
Right. Bingo. And so I call it hard gratitude, man. And the thing is it's miraculous. So it's miraculous because you only need two things ever to change anything, right? And if you go on my website, like my personal website, it'll say all realities are possible. This is a quantum physics, quantum reality statement. So all realities are possible because the quantum field is an infinite number of bits of information, right? But not all realities are probable. The one you're experiencing is the one you'll probably experience tomorrow and the next day and the next day because of the way that you are conditioned to select the bits of information from the field. But anything's possible. At any point in time, you have the will to be able to change anything. But that requires you to actually do it. And so you could have anything, but you need two preconditions. One, you have to actually want it. Like, you can't want to want it, or someone can't want it for you, or the TV can't suggest you might like it. You have to actually wake up and say, like, I want this more than I want to breathe. That's condition number one. Condition number two is a willingness to give it what it takes to get it. Now, that doesn't mean a willingness to give it your all, because your all is based on who you were. So a lot of people say to me, Gina, I went for my goal. I really wanted it. I gave it everything I had and I failed. And I go, great. That wasn't everything you had. That was everything you thought you had up until that point in your life. But that's not everything you have. The situation in which you're, reaching is requiring you to dig deeper. So did you dig deeper? And so now you might be able to dig deeper on your own. You and I have a sort of inherent honey badgerness quality, right? However, if you maybe don't have that, or want a little assistance in that, or want to shortcut the situation, then you hire a coach like you or me, because we know the way, we know the path, we know the way up the mountain. And as long as you're coachable, then you're going to get there, because most people are trying to get goals that someone on earth has already gotten.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, follow the playbook.
Yeah.
But it's not just enough. People, I see this all the time with people like, oh, I want to be a motivational speaker, so I'm going to eat what you eat. I was like, well, what? Right? You got to think what I think. You got to not think what I don't think. You got to believe what I believe. You got to not believe what I don't believe. You got to get up every time you fall down. This is more than just like, oh, I saw so-and-so, drinks green smoothies, so that's going to do it. No, it's not. Yeah. Right. It's a, when you model someone, you model the whole process. Now, this is the engineer in me. And this is why coaching in the field of performance just shortcuts everything, because the coach typically has the process. So you have to have desire and willingness, which if you're working with a coach, that means coachability. That's all you need. That's it.
Yeah. I love this, Gina, because it's so evident that people go, oh, well, this is a tough thing for most people in leadership that I find. They want to model. And if I go, hey, I want to follow CEO Gina, right? Because I worked for Gina and Gina was great. And I learned a lot from her. Okay, good. But my guess is that I could try to model you, but like, I only saw 15, 20%. I don't see what you do with the boardroom. I don't understand what you're thinking. I don't understand what you're avoiding thinking, right? I mean, all those things, there's so much more complexity to, hey, I've seen her do the work and I'll try to do it like she does it, right? Which, that it's flattery, right? For us to mock or to do something like somebody else. Great. But there is a lot more to that process and that system than just saying, oh, hey, I'm going to physically model what she's doing. And so I think that's a huge thing. So as you know, the show Winners Find a Way is based on a quote from the 4 Disciplines of Execution. Winners, when shown data that they are losing, find a way to win. You mentioned that honey badger attitude, right? Like, it's like, hey, this is a not quit in this thing. And part of that, of your resiliency, I'd like to talk about maybe a couple of things that built that resiliency to you, but also the engineering mindset was pretty important, I would think, along the way too, because you knew there was another way to run the test. There's another way to run the system. Maybe there's just a break in the system and I got to change one thing and the whole thing flows, but I got to find out where the choke point is. Is that fair?
Yeah. Like, I was when you said, this honey badgerness, like where it came from, like I grew up in Windsor, like that, that's my answer. But I mean, I didn't, I didn't have I think when I was younger, they might have said she's a bit stubborn. Like I didn't take no for an answer, which had to be exhausting for the adults in my life, right? Because I could always find a way to do something. Always. I never, for me, the phrase, it's not over till the fat lady sings. It's not even the tip of the iceberg. It's like, it's not over till that lady is singing. She's off the stage. She's in a car on her way. Like it's not over until she's like asleep and maybe singing the next song. Like for me, it's just never the way I thought about it. Like when I was in high school, I was on the volleyball team, I was on the varsity volleyball team and I was the number 6 player. So I was a starter, but I wasn't like the best. I wasn't even close, but I was good. I was a decent athlete, a strong person. I never give up. And so that was my attitude on the court, right? And this is back when volleyball was kind of boring and it was all side outs and you could come back from 14-1 and still win a game. And I'd be out there like, come on, we can do this. I'd lose my voice all the time. And when I was in grade 13, they were giving out the like, whatever you get those patches for being on the team, right? And they're doing it on the stage and the coach is going through the starting lineup. Oh, this is so-and-so and she did this and this is so-and-so and here. And then she got to sort of what would have been my position. She skipped over me and went to the 12s. And I was like, oh my God, did she just forget me? And so this is my own limiting belief, right? So I'm in my head and I'm like 18 years old going, oh my God, please God, like cause an earthquake right now, swallow me up. I can't believe, like I knew I wasn't good, but I didn't think I deserved to be skipped over. And then she's on the 2nd string and now she's talking about the 3rd string and she totally didn't mention me at all. So everybody's got their little thing and I'm just standing up there wanting to die. Okay. Because you got to put yourself in an 18-year-old's body in front of people that I, like, don't like, people who like me, people who hate me. I was just like, oh my God, this is the worst nightmare ever. And then she starts talking about the most valuable player. And I'm like, oh my God, she totally forgot me. Right. She forgot me. Now she's going to, the hardest hitter or whatever, the setter or whatever. And then she's saying the most valuable player on a team isn't the one who hits the hardest or whatever. It's the one for which the team would not be the same, wouldn't be the same. And one of my friends, as my ears are just, she's like nudging me. She's like, I think she's talking about you. And I'm like, what? Right. And so she gave me the MVP award, which you have to understand, never before and never again have I ever been the most valuable player because it's always best stats, hard, whatever.
Yeah.
But this particular coach at this very important time in my life said that attitude put us further because it differentiated us from all our competitors. And I was like, whoa, like it changed everything about me, but also about how I viewed value. And so, and all I did was be a relentless believer in the possibility of winning, even when all data showed we were getting our asses literally kicked, right? But we did win some of those games. We did. And even if we didn't, we felt much better about them. And you and I both love Ted Lasso, right? Like what I didn't know then, what I know now is like we were goldfish. It was like that was over, next point. That's over, next point. That's over, next point. That's like the best line in a movie or in a popular show ever. Just be like a goldfish and just you have it? No, then go for it again. Who cares?
10-second memory.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I think that it's so refreshing to see a coach, even in the late 1900s, that understood a contributor and how that contributor is not always the stat jockey, right? Like, and that's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with a stat jockey, right? Like, we need champions to lead the way. We need the best athletes on the courts and on the fields, and we need that. But I don't know how many times in my career, Gina, I have looked at a player on any team, business, sports, whatever, and I've looked at that person and go, man, Trisha, man, I'll take 10 more just like her. Like, well, Trisha's not the fastest. She's not this. She's not. I'm like, man, all she does is come and relentlessly pursue winning, showing our values, making our customers feel like They're the
Yeah.
best and most important thing in the world, and brightens this place with spirit and happiness. And we're spending 80% of our lives at this work, and it would be nothing without her.
Right.
So like,
And
I don't need someone who looks like Trisha. I don't need someone who acts like Trisha. When I say I want 10 more just like her, I want someone who shows those same values,
right.
someone who makes a contribution to our organization the way Trisha contributes to our organization in some miraculous way that just makes everybody a little bit better around her. Because if I got 10 more, like, watch out. Everyone is going to be a superstar around here, and it's going to be we're going to be on a hockey stick, of
Yeah,
growth.
totally. Skills can be taught.
Yeah.
Right. That's why I say there's only two things you need. You need a burning desire. That's an emotional attachment to your outcome. You have to, because that burning desire is what fuels you in the moments of trial and tribulation. Do you really want this? Like, do you really want it? Because if you like, are you sure you really want it? Because I'm, right now I'm going to test you. And then
So let's talk about that. Like, I test people by like, hey, are you interested? Or are you committed? Because interested is talking about it. Committed is doing it. Right.
There it is.
And so how do you test that? How do you test like the want?
Well, if I'm selecting, so if I'm doing a interview with a potential private client, it has to be a 10 out of 10. And so I'll poke it a number of different ways. But I test through behavior. So I'll give a task. And if they don't do it, then they're not demonstrating the behavior of someone who really wants it. And that's okay. I am not the change police. I am not the greatness police. I have a bona fide respect for everybody having their own model of reality. I completely respect that everybody sees the world in their own way. And so I have no need to change anyone. But when they come to me and they ask me for help, I have a very, very stringent process, to the point where I turn away most people, because I only end up working with about a dozen people in any year privately. That doesn't mean I'm not speaking on stages or doing group things or teaching in the classroom, but private clients, like people who are my breakthrough clients, I turn away more than I take, because I need that burning desire, and I need that coachability. And if they don't demonstrate that, what I do won't work. What anybody does won't work. And I have zero interest in becoming another notch on the I'm a failure bullshit belt. Right. So I just don't take them. And because I don't need clients need me. Right. So they need the processes. And I'm one of the few people on earth, when I work with a private client, who won't succumb to their stories, their rackets. I will stay on the cause side of the equation, observing their processes with no judgment whatsoever. And so I'll never become part of their problem. And that's a service, because it doesn't, it's not warm and fuzzy, so to speak, but it does produce the results that they come to me for. But it's challenging, because your brain is going to do everything it can to keep things the same, because its job is to get your meat suit from this day to the next day. That's the brain's job. Are you still here today? Great. Then let's not change anything, because then you'll probably be here tomorrow. That's the brain's
preservation.
job.
Preservation.
Right. So the minute you try tinkering with your programs, even just believing something differently, that's a risk to the system. So the brain, the amygdala, is going to flip out, not because you're at real risk. You're not stepping off the edge of the Grand Canyon, but because you're at risk of changing the program, and that's unpredictable, and that means danger, but that's not real danger. That's what free will is for. So you override it. The minute you override that hardwired resistance to change, the minute you go, I'm changing anyway, thank you for sharing, I'm changing anyway, the brain abandons that strategy, because clearly it didn't work, and it flips into plasticity mode. So now the brain will be looking for as much data as it can to create a new successful program as quickly as possible. So you override it, then your body's working for you, right? That's why when you go to, you travel to a new place, you get there, you've never been there before, you don't speak the language, you don't know how to get the good food, whatever. Your brain, even though it's dangerous to go to a place you've never been to before, the minute you step off the plane and you're like, look, baby, I'm going to this place anyway, your brain goes, okay, fine. I see my initial tactics of coercion and fear didn't work. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open wide here to see if I can find a way for us to succeed as quickly as possible. And that's why you have all these amazing experiences when you travel, because of the state of your brain. When you override that resistance to change, it immediately flips into ultra data collecting. And now it's trying to build a new program as quickly as possible. And so
That's
that's what
good.
coaching is.
Yeah, that's so good. I want to talk about a couple of things there. Like, one is, I see people that are a little bit concerned with change. I caught a little bit of You've Got Mail over the weekend, which is a great rom-com from the late
Right.
1900s.
Right.
And I got a kick out of, the dial-up, right? Like, tick on, tick on, tick on. It's like, oh my God. Like, remember that when this was the system?
Believe me.
Yeah. I mean, and I tell people, like, remember the system of the iPhone 5 to the iPhone 15?
Oh.
Like, if you don't want change, I can give you an iPhone 5
Right.
and you can go back. But we're all faster now. We're all like, whack, 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 whack. Look how much stuff we can do on this thing. Like,
But
it's
how about
crazy.
this? Remember in the 90s? Okay, I know you remember this. So I was working at Procter & Gamble in the early 90s, and we used Microsoft Office. And when Microsoft Office would come out with 95, right? Oh, it's coming, right? They'd have like a pre-launch, like we do iPhones now, right? And then they'd have the launch, and there's a GIF of Gates and these guys on the stage, these awkward computer guys, like dancing at the launch of Office 95, right? And it's just hilarious, because it was like they were a Live Aid concert, and they were launching a word processing, you know what I mean? Like they were watching Office. But I worked at P&G, and our IT guys were early adopters. So they'd go out and they'd buy it, and then they'd send all these documents. Dear Gina, here's a document, please open it. And I couldn't open it because they weren't compatible. So they'd come out with a new version of Word, and it wouldn't be compatible with the old version. And I couldn't open it because they, sent me the new version.
You need the new Word. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So think about this. This is true for those of you who are like, this is a true story. Now, the solution is obvious. I need to upgrade my program, right? That's so obvious. And if it's not clear which program I need to upgrade, it's the one that's causing me a problem. So the problem is the solution. So the problem is Microsoft Word, which means if I go and upgrade Microsoft Word, problem solved. Okay. Now, in this exact example, which actually did happen to me, okay, I didn't throw my computer out the window. I didn't blame the guy for being a jerk for sending me something I couldn't open. I didn't blame Microsoft. I didn't go to therapy and dig up my past traumas as to why I can't do what I want. Okay? I'm serious. What I did was I fixed the freaking program that wasn't working by upgrading it. Now, that is how human beings work.
Yeah.
And that is it. So there you are with whatever you are. And just, you need to know that wherever you are in your life right now is a series of programs, not programs like you're conscious of them. You make them up and then you store them until they become dominant. And then you don't think about them anymore, like driving or whatever, hitting a baseball, right? For you. So when you created the program, hopefully you learned correctly. Like you talked about driving, but we all know somebody who's been driving for 30 years and they're the world's worst driver because they learned to drive poorly. Then they perfected it.
Yeah.
So you created those programs at a particular time in your life. Hopefully you learned properly. Hopefully it got the outcome. But a lot of the programs we created in childhood, they met our needs at the time. So if you're I'm assuming you were a superstar baseball player your whole life. I mean, 3 World Series, who the hell even has that many rings, right? So you created these programs in your youth, but my guess is that probably some of your friends were jealous of your baseballness or whatever, right? So you go out there, you're this awesome, you think, oh, everybody wants Trent to succeed, and then you show off a little bit, and then you get slammed because it's the tall poppy syndrome, right? We root for the underdog until they win, and then we try to take them down. And so as a child or a youth, when you were still developing, probably you created a program called like Dial It Back, Man, because I want to be accepted by my peers. So you dial down your greatness so that other people won't, whatever. Then that becomes a program. And it's a smart program, by the way, because when you're 13 or 14, the most important thing is being accepted by your peers. So it's a brilliant program for the time. It's brilliant. The problem is now we got a 50-year-old running a 14-year-old's program. Hello. So the program's got to be upgraded. There's nothing wrong with you. People always come to me and they're like, oh, I'm such a loser. I think this, or I believe this, or I have this problem, or I can't get this result. And it's like, well, no, you're trying. It'd be like coming to me right now and saying, Gina, I can't record this freaking podcast because I'm using Microsoft Office 95, which was the best program in 1995. And for some reason, I can't run the podcast in 2025. Well, it's an inappropriate program for what you're trying to do now. That's it. That's breakthrough coaching. It's not dramatic. It's just linear. And it really is. Now, some of the results are obviously quite profound, because when you give up a limiting belief or you stop shrinking so others will be less uncomfortable, when you stop those programs, then and you burst out, that's a new way of being. You got to cope with that, and it's quite profound. So I don't want to downplay the experience, but it's very linear. These are the processes can be suspended, programs can be eliminated and rewritten. It's very machine-like. Sorry.
I love it. We could probably spend a therapy session on Trent because I laugh because I talk about this, from the stage, right? And it's a lesson from the Johari window, which was, I didn't care. I didn't care that people were jealous. I did not.
Right.
I was folks. I wanted it, and I was willing to do what it took, and I knew what it took to get there. And the haters in my world weren't willing. Weren't willing to do what I was willing to do. And I wore it like a badge of honor. And a good friend came to me when I was about 18, and I was right before I was going to head off to college. And it was a good lesson. It was a lesson in the Johari window, right? In the Johari window, we know, hey, there's the 4 quadrants, right, of what I know about me, which I don't let everybody else know, right? And then what's common knowledge, and then what others know about me that I may not know about me.
Right.
And a good friend came to me and said, wow, I just really have to tell you, cocky and arrogant. And I was like, ouch, not really what I'm going for.
Right.
Yet I
That's
see
quite
it.
cuddly.
Yeah, I do see it. And, if anyone else would have said it, Gina, I probably would have blown it off. Like, yeah, whatever, man. Like, it's jealousy talking, right? And whatever. But I was, it was a good friend. And it's not how I wanted to be perceived, but I understood why it was. It's a, pro sports is a confidence game. Most
Do you want to play
a confidence game?
A game right now? Do you want to because this is a great example. So what did he say? Cocky and
what's that?
What did he say? Cocky and arrogant?
Cocky and arrogant.
Okay. Yeah. So check this out. I call this the green monkey principle. So you're going to love this. So if I walked up to you when you were 18 and I said, hey, Trent, man, I think you're a green monkey. Would you be upset?
No.
Like 0. Whatever. You'd be like, okay, loser. Yeah. Well, I don't know why you said that to me, but whatever. Yeah, whatever. Right? Whatever rolls right off your back. And so on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like absolutely certain you are not a green monkey.
I was a 10. Yeah.
You were a 10. So you're not a green monkey. You're certain you're not a green monkey. Someone calls you green monkey, 0 impact. Yeah. So there's this guy comes up to you. He says, hey man, you're cocky and arrogant. Yeah. And you didn't have a nothing response. No. And it's not because he said it. It's because on some level, unconscious to you, you actually suspected that it might be true.
Sure.
And so when he said it was triggered the belief, like it triggered it. Okay. Yeah. Now here's the thing. It's to believe. So if we believe I'm arrogant, for example, okay, that's not a building belief. It's a limiting belief. And so it's not going to help you if you see yourself as less than greatness. it's not going to help you in your pursuit of greatness. So if you drag yourself down with beliefs that are limiting, like I'm arrogant and there's something wrong with that, then you got to get rid of that, because your greatness requires purity, right? It requires you to believe wholeheartedly. So this guy did you a favor, technically, by showing you that you believe it. It doesn't matter what he believes. Haters going to hate. That's why that's a line in a song. People are going to believe what they're going to believe. But what's important is what you believe about you. And so when you get triggered by somebody saying things about you, it's not because they said it. It's because on some level you believe it, because you don't believe the green monkey thing. Now we have an axiom for this: sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me, right? We have that because that's how we're supposed to be. So if at any point someone says something to us and it triggers an emotional response by us, the place to look next is inside, not go punch that person in the face, defend it, argue with them, engage with them at all. In fact, and I'm going to go way out to the peak performing action, you should actually be thankful that they did it, because they shortcutted your awareness that you got to get rid of this limiting belief. So Khalil Gibran wrote in I can't remember the name of the book he wrote this in. He said, Sand and Foam, maybe. He said, I've learned silence from the talkative, kindness from the unkind, tolerance from the intolerant. Yet, why am I ungrateful to these teachers? So this guy comes up to you, he goes, hey man, 18-year-old, you're a cocky, arrogant son of a bitch. And you're like, thanks.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And then you go and forgive yourself for being arrogant. And that wasn't my intention. And you clean up whatever you need to clean up and you move on. But that guy just did you a huge favor.
For sure. I tell a lot of people, Gina, like who've seen poor leadership modeled in their life, and they go, wow. And I tell a story about someone I worked for once on a long time ago. And I said, what a blessing. I learned so many things of how not to treat people, what not to do. I mean, it was staggering and impactful, because, I would just flinch at like the treatment of other people, like, oh my gosh. And I also became very well aware of what that person thought and said about me when I wasn't there, because I watched them do it time and time and time again.
But have you ever heard the phrase, what other people think of you is none of your business?
I've heard the phrase.
It really doesn't. People think what they think of you is based on who they are, not based on who you are. It's what you think of you that matters.
Go ahead.
It doesn't matter what people think of you.
Yeah.
It's not based on who you are. It's based on who they are.
That's right. I mean, and I think this is one of the challenges that we're all facing, is we're taking these opinions of 10% of the information and acting like, oh man, I should take that to heart. Like, whoa, first of all, I tell a lot of leaders, Gina, like when you talk about people that are worried about what other people think, I warn them that they are going to be astounded at the lack of frequency they actually think about you, because we are a selfish bunch. We are walking around considering our own concerns and our own challenges. And then everyone goes, Gina, I don't really like that dress. And you're like, I know nothing about fashion. Why would I say it? Why would you care? It means absolutely nothing. Like everyone needs a better raincoat to let that roll off. But the fact of the matter that I thought about you for the 10 seconds of my entire day, which is probably the last time and the only time I thought of this day, that's it. So like, why would you take that opinion of mine, any level of high level regard? It's astounding to me. And I have to tell, and I'll be honest, Gina, I want to talk about this too, because I tell more women than men, like, listen, you're going to be astounded at how infrequently they actually think of you. I know you're concerned about what they think. Please stop. Because when you find out that they are so concerned and self-consumed that there's no validity to that opinion.
So in NLP, one of the meta programs filters that we look at is external versus internal reference. And you're not wrong. It does skew from a gender standpoint. It's very easy to fix it when you realize it's a filter.
Yeah.
I was a big sister. Probably a lot of people don't know that about me, back in the late 1900s. And my little sister, the Big Sisters program.
Like Big Brothers Big Sisters, like the charitable program.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
love
so
it.
I
Great
was,
program.
my little at the time was 12, 13, and when we met, 12, and we're still friends today.
Still in touch. I love that, which is
Oh
a
God,
big part of that
I mean,
program.
it
Big
was
shout out to
life
Big
changing.
Brothers Big Sisters. Big shout out.
Big shout out. Huge. Everybody thinks that she got the good end of the stick, but I'm pretty convinced that I did.
Amen.
Right. Anyway, throughout the years, so there she is starting high school, and she got a bit of a tumultuous past, and a lot of learning disabilities when you're born to heroin addicted parents, and so on and so forth, right? And so there she is, and she's a real go-getter, and she wants to go to university. And she goes to her guidance counselor and says, like, I want to go to university. What courses do I need to take? And the guidance counselor says to her verbatim, oh, honey, you're not really university material.
A 14-year-old kid.
Plus, you can't really afford it. And so she came home in tears. And I said to her, she's like, ooh, and I said, what do you want? She said, I want to go to university. I said, great. What do you need? She said, well, I need these courses. And I said, great. What's the problem? She said, well, I'm really close to failing this particular math. I need this credit of math, or I can't apply to university. I have to get this credit. I said, great. Go to the teacher. Tell him your plans. Say, I will do anything. I have to pass this course. I will do extra work. I will do extra projects. I have to pass this course. Just do that. If you want to pass this course, you're going to need to do what it takes to get that grade so that you can apply to university. And forget about what the guidance counselor said. And so I said, you just keep focused on your goal and do the things required. So she went, she got 50% in that math credit, which enabled her. She said to him, I will never take math again. Promise. So she kept her promise. So she applied, she got in. And what was so amazing, she's like, now I got in. How am I going to pay for this? I'm like, keep your eye on the prize. It just keep doing the actions you need to do. Okay. It'll come. And then she went for a lunch at I want to say like a step grandmother's or somebody's, whatever. I can't remember the actual details, but it was like not a direct relative, but sort of like a half direct relative.
Yeah.
And this person took her aside and said, you are the first one to break this chain. So I'm paying for your tuition and your living expenses for the entire time you're in school. Now, nobody could have predicted, not even me. And I'm like the queen of prediction. But again, it comes back to what were the qualities that made that possible? Well, first of all, someone told her no, and she just went, thank you for sharing, and moved on. Didn't hold a grudge, didn't fight it, didn't even need that person, quite frankly. Just got done what needed to get done and never gave up based on circumstances. Never. Just kept moving forward. I said, when the bridge comes and you have to cross it, then you'll make a decision. Until that time, you just keep moving forward. I don't know, like the qualities are all there. Now, when you're, people on your call, probably big CEOs or performers, but that's peak performance. That's what peak performance is. The performing at your very best to the point where the circumstances are barely keeping up with you. That's peak performance.
I want to talk quickly and pivot a little bit. I love that story, by the way. And I have so many friends who, as you know, in the entrepreneur organization and YPO and the spaces where we speak and a lot of our tribe here, they talk about those stories that were motivation for them. Some counselor, some teacher, somewhere down the line who was like, oh, well, the world needs ditch diggers. Like, what? Like, man, I had a little bit higher view of myself, and it's like, I can't fathom the impact that people have and how many times, sadly, that's probably had greater impact. But I want to talk quickly about when you and I met. This is one of these crazy little stories. Like when you and I met, you had taken your children out of school. You were on a 1-year homeschooling resource, travel, world education of the 4 of you, your husband, and your 2 children. And you had a speaker lineup of about 80 to 90, I think, venues from what I remember.
It was a crazy schedule. It was in one direction around the world.
Yeah. And I witnessed one of those, crazy things in Greece, which was in amazing, and a keynote speech that you gave, and with a great story behind it. But like at that point, I mean, all the world says, what are you doing, Gina? You can't take your kids out of school. You can't do this. You can't. And you're like, we did it. And by the way, the kids probably tell me what they think about that year now.
Well, I don't know. You have to ask them actually, but everybody had their opinions. We just thanks for sharing your opinion. That's what I say. Like, thank you. Like, look, it's still a free world, right? Like,
Yeah.
you're entitled to share your opinion. And I want to remind, like, I try to live by Voltaire's words. Voltaire said, I completely disagree with what you're saying, but I will die defending your right to say it.
Yeah.
So when somebody says to me, you're this, or this is crazy, or you're insane, or whatever, I just go, thanks for sharing your opinion. I don't give a shit, but thanks for sharing it. So people around the world were telling us that we were doing this and we were doing that about our kids. And I'll tell you a story of that trip. So, two things happened. One was around Christmas time, I remember, because we were in Zanzibar and a couple of gigs had gotten canceled and we had spent a little bit more money than we'd planned. And so what was originally a bit of just a small gap in finances was actually quite huge. And my husband and I were, as my daughter calls it, whisper yelling, one night when we thought the kids were asleep, and I was like, well, maybe we should just go home, because we can just crank the money if we go back and do everything the way we used to do it before. My son comes flying into the room and whips my book on the table and is like, do you even listen to yourself? And I was like, what? And he was like, you make us sit there, and because they used to have to come and sit through all the talks, and you're not even doing what you teach. And I was like, you're right. And so my husband and I were like, okay, so we started over at the beginning. What do we want? We did. And long story short, that Greece keynote that you saw was the result of that change of focus. And so it was the remembering, how do we do this? And we stayed on the trip, we honey badgered our way through it, and it was the most successful thing we've ever done. But that was a turning point for us. And then my kids were out of school, and you said homeschooling. That's not fair to the people out there who are actually legit homeschooling their kids. I was world schooling my kids, which was bring a math book and make them read. And we were in South Africa just after this Zanzibar experience. We were in South Africa, and Mandela dies while we're there. And when we go somewhere, we would learn about the notable figures. So the kids were learning about Mandela. We went to Robben Island. We watched Invictus. They were 10 and 12. It wasn't too heavy. And so we went to Robben Island, and he died the next day. And the kids were like, holy shit, right? Because the country was transformed. There was celebrations. People were celebrating his life and just the contributions he made. And it was really, really moving. And then we were scheduled to go to Johannesburg as part of our itinerary, but it happened to coincide with Mandela's funeral. And so we're at the Apartheid Museum in Johannesburg, and it blew my mind. I won't give it away because it's a spoiler alert. It's one of the greatest experiential things we'd ever done. So we're inside the Apartheid Museum. My son's had this massive experience going in the doors because they recreate the insanity at this museum. And so we're in there, and he's pushing all the buttons, and he's watching this video of this old British guy talking about the virtues of apartheid. And my son goes, he's 10. Not in school. And he goes, Mom, is this the same guy from the Diamond Museum that we went to a couple of days ago? And I go, yeah, that's the same guy. He recognized his name. British guy, scratchy video. And he goes, so wait, did the British come here and then want to take the diamonds? And then they took them, and then they created apartheid to create a separation of the money resources? And I was like, yeah. Right? My 10-year-old from his experience figured it out. And I was like, wow, I don't think you could find an adult that could put it together.
Put those two together. I think that's so awesome. The kids, the accountability. I love this. I love that story about you guys traveling. And by the way, you should write a book about that.
Well, it's funny. I wanted to, but nobody really was interested in it at the time. Maybe I'll do it now, but it sort of seems like, I don't know.
Pretty good.
My point was that the talk I did in Greece that you saw was, I know that public education is the most efficient way to educate a great number of people, but when did it become the best way? It's not the gold standard, it's the efficient standard. And so education doesn't, one size fits all. That's what I was talking about on that stage. It wasn't one size fits all, because a lot of entrepreneurs, as you know, they didn't even finish high school.
Yep. Right.
And yet they're super successful, because
Yep.
it has nothing to do with education.
Yep. Well, not that kind of education.
But
Not
like
book.
people always say, why do we have to memorize this Shakespeare? Here's why. Do you know why? Because I had to memorize, to be or not to be. That's a question, blah, 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 right? And I remember being in grade 10 going, this is the stupidest thing I've ever had to do. Like, this is when am I ever going to do this? I'm not a theater person. But here's back to the change thing we were talking about. So there's this to be or not to be, right? It's very specific. You have to memorize it precisely. You have to get every single step right, and memorizing it makes it the dominant habit. So actually, that memory work in school was creating neurology around get it right and then practice it until you can't not do it that way. Right? Here's the periodic table: hydrogen, helium, lithium, beryllium, boron, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen. I don't need to know those things anymore, but I had to memorize them as a chemical engineer. Now, what they created in me was a nervous system that knew how to know when I did it right and know how I made it dominant. That's why we do things like this. So when we chuck things out because we say this doesn't make sense and this, you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's not about the frickin' speech. It's about the act of memorizing something perfectly and then repeating it. Right? Yeah. What did you say? I loved what you said earlier. Interested and committed.
You're either interested or you're committed, right? You're either,
man.
I love it. Well, for everybody, hey, listen, it has been a fabulous show. I got to let Gina go. I only get her so long. And this has been another fabulous episode of the Winners Find a Way show every Thursday morning, 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern, live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and our Leadershipity YouTube channel. And then we go all podcast, all the major networks Friday morning with the show. And so check it out. Gina Mollicone-Long, thank you so much for being here today. And as you know, winners find a way.